Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We, everybody, we have a sign-up sheet right here for for those that want to provide public comment. Today we're talking, for the record, today we're talking about House Bill 1037, and Steve, are you ready? Okay. We're gonna have you go ahead and go first, and then let me see. Let me see that list. I'll tell you who's second. Okay. Okay. First we've got Steve, and then we've got Mark Wolford, and then after Mark we have Demetrius. So that's the lineup right now. Let me turn you on. Is that one
I'm on.
working? All right. Good.
Yes. I thought we were going to talk more about The Mandalorian again. I'm all in for that. Okay. This is the way. You ready to go, Chairman? Go ahead. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of this body, for giving me this opportunity to speak. I'm here today I'm a lobbyist with Barnes & Thornburg and an entertainment lawyer in this state. I work with many of the major studios and streamers who bring content to our wonderful state. And, you know, I think I want to express on behalf of all of them the thanks to you and to this body for doing this work and cleaning up a lot of things I think that have been left over and need to get cleaned up in our film tax credit system. We, you know, for all the criticisms that our system has gotten, the most important part that I think, Mr. Chairman, you brought up yesterday is that we are making money at this and we're putting Georgians to work, and that's the most important thing. That is what we've all aimed for in this industry. I know we have other folks talking, and I want to give them most of the time, but I just want to take this time and say we have something that's working. We need some tweaks and some fixes, but this system is working and it can be done in a good way. So with that, I'll turn it over. If there are any questions about yesterday's discussions or anything that anyone wants to ask, I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay. Is that you, Chuck?
It is. I have a question. If I can, since you represent folks that use this credit.
That's correct.
Okay. Can I ask, Mr. Chairman, about some changes you made in the bill? And I'm assuming he's working with it. I'm going to put him a little bit on the spot because he's probably worked with the chairman on the bill. I had a question, though. When I read the bill at the one point and had some issues with the expansion. The question I want to ask you is the Chairman Dollar, in trying to right-size it, had taken the credit away for post-production done on film shot outside the state.
Okay.
Is that correct? Did I read that correct?
No,
Chairman Dollar?
No, that's consistent with the current code.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
already there.
I thought that had changed.
No, so whether there is a post-production credit that's a different bill that allows for standalone post, where post only qualifies.
Right.
And that goes to the post-production company.
Okay,
This changes nothing.
Okay, that's fine, because again, I just saw the bill for the first time yesterday, didn't have a chance to go into it further, but wanted to make sure that those jobs were in Georgia, regardless of where it was filmed, that we weren't taking that away, because that seemed like, okay, good.
Yep, we've got that in the
again,
standalone
my
post.
apologies, I saw it for the first time yesterday and just wanted to make sure that appeared to be a good thing.
That's a very good thing.
So
I think
I didn't want that to go away.
Chairman Stevens worked very hard on that legislation a few years ago, and this doesn't go into that credit at all.
That seemed to be a good thing, so we wanted to.
Yeah. No, I agree with
Thank
you.
you.
And those are great jobs, and that our Georgians are doing and getting trained in, and that's a skill that is worth a lot of money for some folks, and I think that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, when we have a bit more time, I want to take the committee to one of these facilities where they actually make the sausage, and it's very impressive the amount of work and sophistication that goes into to what they do and making a finished product. It's incredible.
And I know our university program and TCSG is working on additional classes toward creating the people ready for that work.
Yeah, that was Chairman and I talked about it with Georgia Film Academy. They're also working on a MFA program for screenwriting, and that's what makes us a fully sustainable industry over the long term. Is that we can be the entire part of the making the sausage, as it were. You know, not only going to the set of Stranger Things and seeing the house and all that sort of stuff like we did the other night, and then, you know, and meeting the people that do the set decorations. I mean, this is not just about, you know, people look at the talent. There are a bunch of people behind the scenes that are doing all the work on these productions.
Well, Steve, that's all I see. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for this opportunity. My name is Mark Wofford, and I am the General Manager of Production Consultants and Equipment, or PC&E. I'm a Georgia native, born and raised here, and a graduate of our public school systems, and a graduate of the University of Georgia. Production Consultants and Equipment, or PC&E as we are commonly known, has been in the business of renting film equipment for the past 37 years here. And we are a one-stop shop for camera, lighting and grip, soundstage rentals, and sales and expendables. 7 years ago, the founder of the company, Doug Smith, sold his interest in the company to the employees in an ESOP transaction, and so now we are an employee-owned company. We like to refer to ourselves as Georgia grown and employee-owned. We currently have 31 full-time employees, from warehouse employees that are just entering the workforce and are been with us less than a couple of years, to seasoned professionals that have been at the company anywhere from 10 to 30 years. And for me personally, this is my 15th year at PC&E and my 31st year working in the film business here in Georgia. Our location is a 60,000 square foot building in northwest Atlanta. We acquired a smaller lighting and grip company, which is what we rent, a little over a year ago, and we continue to look at other acquisitions to grow our business. In the 37-year history of the company, we have seen the industry change dramatically, and over the years, we have seen various attempts to create incentives that would grow the businesses, and it wasn't until the current law was put into effect that the industry here truly skyrocketed. At one point, we were only a handful of companies that offer what we offer. Now the list is too long to mention everyone by name here, and we are one of the members of the Studio and Infrastructure Alliance, and I represent our infrastructure members on that council. It's companies like CineLease, Lightning Rentals, Kofor Brothers, Herc Entertainment Rentals, Sim Digital, Crafty Apes, and Moonshine Post. We recently made an investment into the only Bolt-X high-speed motion control robot east of the Rockies, and the only one of its kind on track in North America. It's an arm that does repeatable moves that you can program and can move at high speed. The arm can effectively move at 30 feet per second, and you can couple that with a high-speed camera to shoot high-end visual effect plates or commercial effects. And this was an investment for us of several hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a large part of the decision process was the certainty of revenue being generated by the need for it on television shows and feature films. Were that business not here, we probably wouldn't have made that investment. And its first job was on a promotional piece of a television show that is filming here because the star of that show is currently also making a movie here, and he recently bought a home here. So that job wouldn't have happened without the current business that exists. We have more than doubled our inventory of leased motion picture dollies since the advent of the film tax credit, from less than 10 to 21 now. And we have multiple dollies on long-term rental to television shows, and we provide daily rentals to commercials and features that need them. The majority of our business has always been in the rental of equipment to the production of television commercials, and this has not changed dramatically due to the film incentives. However, what has changed as a result are some of the projects that are being filmed here only because of the incentives. And at one time, as an example, we were forced to buy equipment and supplies from vendors that only existed in other states. Thanks to the incentives, we have multiple options locally now, and those companies that have opened here are serving many other companies just like us. And they have employees that are buying houses and paying taxes and supporting the economy. There is an interconnected web of success and growth that is most often out of the spotlight. And this was one of the reasons our Studio Alliance put together the book, We Are Georgia Film, that you were kind enough to let us present on Monday to you. And the last thing I'd like to say is, for me, I see the film tax credit as the fuel that powers the engine that drives the success of our industry. And we are now in a position as an industry to start originating content locally and create self-sustaining growth. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I don't see any questions from the members,
Okay.
but thank you for your testimony.
Truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome to come. We will show it to you.
We can do that for a price. We can get it to do first. What about a tax credit?
So I'm going to switch the order up here. I didn't go further down the list, but we have a representative that would like to speak to the bill. So, Demetrius, I'm going to have you come up after Beth Moore. Go ahead. And then after Demetrius, I've got Peter Stephanopoulos. And Representative Moore?
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, fellow colleagues. I know you guys see me sitting in the front row as often as I can here because I want to make myself a resource to you. I am an entertainment attorney. The subject matter that this committee hears directly impacts my personal life outside of my service here at the Capitol. And one of the things that a couple of things I wanted to say with regard to HB 1037 is I am fully in support of it. I commend the chairman and everybody here in this room who has worked to make these necessary changes and improvements to the film tax credit. But there is one additional improvement we can make that we haven't yet discussed, and this is the issue that I wanted to bring forth in front of this committee. And in fact, I have the language that I would propose that we add as we amend this bill in this folder. And if it's the chairman's will, I'd be happy to provide copies of that, which I have currently in this folder. Would it be okay if I pass those around? Sure. Sure. So I would say one of the mistakes that was made when the film tax credit bill was originally passed is that it left music licensing out of the equation. Film productions spend a large part of their budget, sometimes between 5 to 10% of their budget, on music licensing. When was the last time you saw a film or television show that did not incorporate music into it in some way, shape, or form? The last major motion picture that did not have music in it was No Country for Old Men back in 2007. But the vast majority of them have music. Sure. So currently there is no incentive in the Georgia Film Tax Credit to incentivize the use of music that is written by Georgians, recorded by Georgians, and promoted by Georgia record labels. This would be an easy fix in the bill. This is an idea that I floated to some of my entertainment industry allies, many of whom are in this room. I tossed it by them last year, and the common refrain I got was, Representative Moore, I completely agree with the change that you're proposing, but we just don't want to do anything with the Georgia Film Tax Credit. We don't want to open that Pandora's box to changing it in any way, so while I agree with you, now is just not the time. Well, that Pandora's box is now officially open. And so I would like to propose that we consider the incentivization of Georgia music, as we make these other additional improvements to the Georgia Film Tax Credit. And again, I have language that was drafted by Legislative Council to do exactly this. It contains guardrails to make sure that any expenses in music licensing fees that go toward On the one hand, there's synchronization licensing fees that are paid to the songwriters, and master use licensing fees that are paid to the recording artists and record labels. The changes I would be proposing would make it so that those expenditures would only be counted towards the credit if they in fact go to a Georgia taxpayer, including any kind of licensing clearinghouse company that facilitates those. That the clearinghouse would have to be located in Georgia, the songwriters would have to be located in Georgia, the recording artists would have to be located in Georgia. And to the extent that there are multiple parties involved where some are not located in Georgia, that now that we have more robust auditing provisions built into the tax credit, that would be accounted for and only that portion of the tax credit will only apply in the event those fees were paid to a Georgia taxpayer. So that is the change that I'm proposing. Mr. Chairman, I know I passed that idea by you last year, and I think the time has come to reconsider that language.
All right. There's a question or comment from Representative Dukes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Representative, the way it's kind of structured is based on the expenses that are allocated to making the production. How would we do that in music? Is it the studio time, or just how do we go about identifying those things that would be eligible for credit?
Sure. So if there's a piece of music currently out there on the market, then what may happen is a film producer would say, I really like that song. I want to put that song in the opening credits of my film. In that case, there is a fee that is paid, a licensing fee. And that licensing fee is bifurcated into two payments. On the one hand, there is a licensing fee paid to the songwriter and the publisher that controls the underlying composition. There is an additional licensing fee called a master use licensing fee that is paid to the owner of the sound recording. So that's simply a licensing fee that is paid to a piece of music that already exists. It's like renting the music for purposes of enhancing the production of the film. Right now, we have qualified expenditures that are similar in nature, but for things like being able to rent a facility or to rent a car. In both of those cases, the production would temporarily make use of that property, but that the owner would retain ownership of that property and receive a licensing fee for the use of that property in the film. With music, it is the exact same thing. The film producer would pay a licensing fee to borrow the music, but otherwise the artist and the songwriter would retain ownership of that property.
Kind of what we were doing is stimulating employment in the film industry, because basically at the end of the day what we're trying to do is create high-paying jobs for Georgians while we develop an industry. I guess if the music has already been developed and the job has already been exhausted, I'm just trying to figure out. You see what I'm saying?
I do, and it really just has to do with the nature of what it means to be an artist and a musician and how they make money. Because it is the case where an artist or musician will make a piece of music, and then the way that they retain their job, their income stream, is to find new ways to distribute and exploit and commercialize that piece of music. So while the recording process may end, the opportunity to earn money and to support Georgia artists continues so long as that artist has that piece of music out into the marketplace. Really where the incentive comes in is right now Georgia productions are not incentivized to source the music in their productions from Georgia. So they are expending money on music licensing, but that money may be going to artists, record labels, and songwriters, either in other states or even in other countries. By amending this with clear definitions of what it would take for that music licensing fee to qualify, would provide an additional incentive for these film producers to source that music from our fellow Georgians.
Got it.
Good.
Representative Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Moore, for bringing this up. Just a couple of quick questions, like about how much would that title song? Is there? I know you maybe can't pinpoint exactly what it would be. Is there a range that we know exactly what that would cost for a song from an artist that's, I don't know how to classify, medium famous in the state of Georgia? You know,
Yeah.
I know that's a negotiated deal, right? So, but how would that? What's the dollar amount that we could be looking at?
I get this question a lot in my line of business,
sure.
and the truth is there is no industry standard. You know,
Right.
some songwriters and artists are willing to give up their music for production for $0.
Like a rock
Yeah.
for the Chevy commercial when he came back. I think they didn't pay him a whole lot of money for that. I can't remember.
But then you have, you know, your, Billboard charting songs. You know, if it's used in a piece of advertising, I mean, it could garner up to $1 million. I mean, the fees are really span the gamut. In some cases, film producers have indicated that they set aside 5 to 10% of their production budget for music alone.
Follow it, Mr. Chair? Yes. Thank you. And then I've gone to see a movie, and then I've looked at the list of titles on a soundtrack that had that movie's name on it, and I can't remember some of the songs that were played in the soundtrack in the movie. And so would this kind of extent, which I'm cool, some of the ones I've gotten are good soundtracks, but would this extend to that type of thing? Does that count into the production activity of the film? And that's just as an aside, curious question, you know.
No, this
Okay.
would be what fall under what is called a synchronization and master use license, which is it takes its name from the synchronization of the audio with the video.
Right, with the film. Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your
Mr. Chair.
questions.
Is this you, Chuck? It is. Okay. Representative Martin?
Thank you. I'll be brief because it may be in the details that you hand us, but one of the concerns I would have is if we provide the credit and it is, you're sourcing a piece of music that was done in 1980, you know, nobody's going to get paid for it anymore, owned by a company that's in California, even though it was recorded in Georgia, Georgians would get no benefit from that, but we would be expending the credit. Are those types of things taken care of in the definition of what you're trying to incentivize the use of?
Yes,
Okay,
that is the intention.
Then I'll
But-
look and get my
yeah.
answers from there, or if
Yeah.
you feel.
Well,
We're handing it out right now. Chairman.
Actually, thank you, Representative Martin. You reminded me of another point that I think could be considered a huge benefit to a change like this, which is that it could potentially incentivize publishers to relocate from California to Georgia, because then they would have to be a Georgia corporation that pays taxes in Georgia in order to qualify. So that could, in fact, move companies to Georgia. And yeah, go ahead.
No, fair enough. But just a brief follow-up on that as we find. Again, I haven't seen your notes, but one of the things you want to be careful of, I assume this would still be the 30, could get the 30% credit? Is that?
It would be considered one of the qualified expenses.
So, which could be up to 35% if they got the boost up on the movie, the whole nine, right? So one of the things I think we have to be careful of, and again, I haven't read this, is if we're given a 30% credit for using something that generates $1 worth of income that we only get 6% income tax from. We kind of, and it's already been done. There's nobody being employed to do it today. So there's some, I see your point, but I also see Representative Dukes is talking about we're trying to get things, we're trying to spin up the economy today, not just pull a soundtrack out of a library. I mean, that's a valid thing to get Georgians to do it in the future, but so maybe there's a bifurcated place for if you use old music that was recorded versus music that was made specifically for this movie to go on the soundtrack. But
Yeah.
I'll read your definition.
Sure. Well, I'd be happy to kind of walk you through this and show how this fits perfectly in line with the language and the spirit of the laws that currently exist for other qualified expenditures. Because this was drafted last year without the current version of the bill in mind, you'll be able to see the parallels, but some of the format might change. So all it does is you can see that, on line 17 of my version of the bill, I believe it's around line 33 of the current bill, is that you can see where it says, where you see the language crossed down on line 17, it says excluding licensing fees for sound recordings and musical compositions. So it was made explicit for whatever reason, I was not here at the time, that they did not want to include music licensing fees at the time. So what we're suggesting is that we cross that language out, and instead say excluding licensing fees unless such costs are qualified Georgia music expenditures. Qualified Georgia music expenditures are then defined on the next page, on page 48. So if you take a look at that, Chairman Martin, that may provide you with some additional information to answer your question. But the reason that I believe this is falls perfectly in line with the spirit of the bill already is that you can see on on line 20, if you recall this paragraph, which there is a corollary to this in the current bill, is that it's listing out various types of production expenditures that will be counted towards the film tax credit, so that the production can reach those minimum thresholds. So, for example, on line 20, it expressly lists rental of facilities and equipment as well as leasing of vehicles. So the corollary I would make here is that if a film producer wanted to use, a Chevy in their film, the licensing or the rental fee for that car would be covered, even though the car has already been manufactured, it already exists. The nature of that vehicle is that it can be leased out and used for multiple purposes. Music is the exact same way. So even if something was created in 1980, somebody is still making a living off of the exploitation of that music. And this would be in a new way for them to do that, but only if they live in Georgia and they're a Georgia taxpayer.
I understand, and I won't belabor the point, but I think that brings back to the thing, that the issue I had yesterday. In some cases, we're spending 30% credit on an expense that has nothing to do with spending up the economy. In other words, we rent a car, as you say, that may be a $10,000 expense, so we give them a $3,000 credit when the only thing that was really generated there is one employee that was paid a couple $100 to drive the car over and back. We lease that car over and over, and we credit for that car that doesn't. If it generates income, we only get a 6% return on that. When we want this credit to employ people, cause new things to be built. So I mean, you're right. It does fit in some of those things, and some of those, the 30% for some of those credits give me pause as well. But that's not for today.
All right, thank you. Next, Mike, Representative Chokas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this question is directed more towards you than Representative Moore. Since this substitute that Representative Moore is suggesting would be a tax credit for music production that is already being taxed, wouldn't it require a fiscal note before we could move on this?
I think that's a question probably better answered by the Ways and Means Committee. It would have a fiscal impact. As with all of those audits, I'm not sure how they magically come up with those numbers, but that would be it would appear so, but we're not here to decide that right now. I think we're just hearing this for the first time and having some healthy discussion on it. But thank you for the question.
May I offer a comment to that? Sure. If legal counsel determines that this does require a fiscal note, I would respect that. But in my opinion, it doesn't. If this bill were to pass on its own, it would not cost money to implement this. It's simply one, I believe, small expansion of what we already have in the law, which is that we have a list of qualified expenditures. And I just believe it was a grave oversight that we did not include music licensing as one of those qualified expenditures.
The reason for the fiscal note is not what it would cost to implement, it's actually the cost of the credit. If it increases the tax expenditure, that we have to get an estimate of what that additional credit would be, not the cost to implement it.
Right.
Are you through, Representative Chocos? Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Representative Fry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really like this idea, and to your point, of the 5 to 10% of production costs for music, is that a number that we can come up with? Of what's an average production in the state? I know that's like crazy questions, like, you know, how much is a car these days, right? It could go from 15,000 to, you know, 150,000, right? So, but is there a number that we can look at that says, like, what's 5% of a production?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have the minimum spend, correct me if I'm wrong, is $500,000 to qualify for this. So you could imagine that, you know, if you even have a, you know, what is considered a small budget film that wants to be able to reach that $500,000 threshold, being able to include the cost that they have to expend on music licensing would be just simply one of those line items that helps them reach that minimum threshold.
Thank you,
That's
Ms.
it.
Follow up. And, you know, of course, Chairman Martin walks out of the room. I want to point out that this credit would be the only designated Georgia-owned credit in that list, because I would assume that if I'm a car rental place that has a bunch of classic cars, but I do my taxes and everything out in California or in Tennessee or Alabama, that I could rent cars for this credit in Georgia, but I wouldn't be paying any taxes. So there'd be zero return on every other bit that's already in the list, but these qualifications would create a return to the state. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, that when it came to the music piece of this, we wanted to get it right and express that we only intend for this to support Georgia songwriters and music artists, which is why we took great length to define what a qualified music expenditure would be in a way that doesn't exist for any of the other qualified expenditures.
And then one more last question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We don't have a cap on this, right? So we don't even know what the fiscal note would look like anyway, to any of it. All of a sudden, if production in the state started costing twice as much tomorrow, then we'd be looking at 30% of twice as much as what we already do right now, right? Anyway, that's just a theory. Just want to point that out.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Dukes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Moore, the more I hear your bill, the more I kind of like it. I had some reservations at first based on the fact that, you know, we're not doing production and we're not increasing jobs, which is what we're trying to do. But what we are doing is we're establishing an industry, that we're building an industry such as what we did with the movie industry. And we're creating an opportunity for more people who's in this particular industry to consider Georgia. And if we begin to start building, it's another one of those pieces that we're adding to the infrastructure of developing a real strong artistic community in this state. And I think it probably would bode well for the future of Georgia.
Well, thank you for your support, Representative Dukes. I appreciate that. And, you know, the more money we can put into Georgia artists' pockets, the better they'll be able to continue working in the music industry, and the more studio time they'll book, the more records they'll make. And that's just the nature of the music industry, is that, you know, they may have one product, but the job of the artist is to get it out there and to continue to make money off of their music. If they can't do that, they may stop making music, and that would be a real shame. There you go. Yes, absolutely. We need that studio down in Albany, in Doherty County.
And to wrap us up, Representative Belton?
So, Representative Moore, didn't Shakespeare once say that music is the food of love? Is that correct?
I believe the gentleman knows of which he speaks.
And isn't it true that Jackie DeShannon wrote that what the world needs now is love. Is that correct?
I believe it does, yes.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman? Is it true that Georgia is trying to become an international state, and we're trying to expand our international presence all over the world? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's true.
Yes, thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, that's the last question. Thank you, Representative.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Okay, next, Demetrius Mazakova, and then Peter, and then Rick after him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those of you who know me know that my work with this tax credit goes back 15 years to the very original bill that we passed in 2005. And my role today is not to talk about history as much as to bring to the work group's attention the people, not the studios or the production companies or all the others that are involved in making movies and TV productions, but the people. And my group, IATSE, which stands for the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, are the people behind the camera. They're the ones that are Georgia citizens who, as we pointed out when we made a presentation 2 weeks ago, during the last tax year of 2018, individually paid $17.5 million in Georgia income tax. What has made the jump from a couple hundred people in this union, the grips, the electricians, the best boys, the people who work in costumes, all the people behind the camera, from the early 200s to the more than 5,300 people that are members and work in the industry today, is the fact that the legislature passed a competitive tax credit law that has generated all these films coming to our state. And with that, all these people who are working. The reason why I'm talking to you today is I appreciate very much, and IATSE appreciates very much, the work that this working group has put into House Bill 1037, because 2 months ago, with all the negative information that was coming out of the press, that the audits were showing how bad the industry was being operated and how bad the tax credits were being applied, this legislation addresses and attempts to correct some of those issues. But I want to call to your attention one issue, not that we're speaking on behalf of smaller production companies. They have their own ability to articulate their positions. But I'm calling to your attention the possibility of the competition that we enjoy, the competitive edge that we enjoy in Georgia today, may inadvertently be lost when some of these smaller productions decide that that effort to get the extra 10% may not be worth doing business in the state of Georgia. Louisiana is waiting for our business. New Mexico is waiting for our business. So I'd like to call to your attention the fact that as we are putting together language to tighten up a bill that is responsive to the audit, we may be creating
an environment that the big boys, the big studios, will have no problem with this language, but the smaller productions might. They might find that it's not worth the effort to continue to do work here in Georgia. And that's their business, but as it applies to our workers, they may lose jobs because the productions will not be here for us to work on. That's all I wanted to say as representing the people that are behind the scenes who do the work behind the camera.
All right, Representative Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I guess I'm trying to understand your point. Are you saying that smaller productions would not want to comply with the audits?
No, I'm not saying that. I am speculating, and that's all we can do because we don't know if this scenario will materialize. But if you have a $10 million budget film, and some of these smaller productions currently use that 30% credit to put together the financing for that film. If they have to do extra work and get that extra 10% further down the line as opposed to how it is done today, they may choose, instead of doing that, they may choose to go to Louisiana to shoot their movie. That's a speculative possibility. I don't know, but I wanted to call that attention, that issue to the attention to this working group.
Okay, I appreciate that comment. I see that one of the main focus of this legislation is to allow the industry to add greater transparency and for everyone and for Georgia to be that model so that we only attract those that not only want to do business here, but want to do business here the right way. So it's certainly not the intent to try to run off folks that may not want to comply with the things that we have in place here.
I'm not suggesting that this language would chase the business away. I'm saying that we need to be aware that the type of standards that we are going to be imposing, because they're different than what is currently the standard, may trigger loss of business. If that's the will of this legislature, that's fine. We'll continue to do work, and we'll continue to be a great state for shooting film and doing TV productions.
Okay. All right. Representative Fry, you're next.
Thank you for indulging me, Mr. Chairs. So, thanks for speaking. 10 million is a small production.
Pretty much so.
They do an audit, they get the extra 10%. How much is an audit for a $10 million production?
I don't know.
About $20,000 maybe. Ish, less than that. So it seems like it'd still be pretty profitable for an individual or a company to be able to invest in this.
That's not the issue. I think everybody who is doing business in Georgia should meet the standards of the law and should be happy to go through an audit. As I read this legislation, that 10% uplift is down the road and may take some time before it is earned. And that may cause a chilling effect when a company decides, do I go to Louisiana to shoot, or do I continue to do business in the state of Georgia?
Sure. I mean, I understand that. 10% of 10 million. It's a lot of money. And that you got to not get money for a long time for that not to be worth your while. So
Yeah.
I appreciate your concerns, but I think that I think the policy's sound.
Well, the intent is to make sure the credit is earned when it's earned, when they're receiving the credit for advertisement, for promotional advertisement, and when that is done, that's when they earn the credit. That's that is the idea behind this change. So for the committee. Next, is this you? Chairman Nix?
Thank you. You keep mentioning Louisiana. They got a better credit program than we do. Why would they go there? I thought we had the best credit in the country.
We have a very good credit. Louisiana has a credit that, with certain circumstances, could be as much as 40% if they choose to shoot in certain geographic areas of the state. But other states have a credit. May not be as good as ours, because ours has great opportunities to do good business in the state. But if you're talking about meeting some standards for an audit and subsequently to get that extra 10% that we have beyond the 20% to reach the 30% level that we have in the state of Georgia, it may mean that they choose to shoot somewhere else. That's all I'm calling to the attention of this working group.
Okay, I think that's just broad speculation. I don't understand that.
Well, it's part of what we're here for. I think Representative Dukes is about to jump out of his chair, but I'm gonna go ahead and recognize. Is this you? Okay, Chairman Martin.
Also, let me, I find myself sometimes having to be the bad guy sometimes. But let me tell you what has a chilling effect. And I mean no disrespect to what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. But this chilling effect when you're talking about $600 million, $1 billion, more than $1 billion, and 11 million Georgians have needs for K through 12 education and a number of other things. We want to be a part. I mean, clearly, the policy of this group thus far wants to be a policy. There are people downstairs that serve with us that think 30% is too large a share. Okay, we can go. If you say they go to 40 and we're at 30 and we go to 40, pretty soon we should just do the movies ourselves and get in the darn production business and get some of the upside. I don't mean, but I think somebody has to look at the harsh reality of it at some point. At some point, we are, in fact, the way this is going, 30% owners of these productions. We just don't get anything for it. We don't get any upside. So I don't. If I'm coming on a little hard here, I guess I want to. I hear what you're saying, and they can do that. And if Texas decides to give them 50, they can go there. Because I promise you, if I get invited back in November, we're not going to 55. There's a place where, hardworking Georgians are paying money every day, and look a gift horse in the mouth too much, and you have problems. So I hear what you're saying. I don't think Chairman Dollar is trying to make it too onerous, but I got a number of calls, and we hear from teachers and we hear from other people. So great information for you, and I guess I am being argumentative a bit, but I think the pushback to the small companies out there is we love to have you here, but in order to justify this kind of expenditure to the people that pay the bills, 11 million Georgians, some of which are the members of your organization that work there, we want to be good stewards of the money, and that means an audit, and we're going to work with you to help you get there. But at least we not forget, 30%, it's a big number, and it needs to be audited. So I want to be fair to you.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond? Yes. I want to make clear that we dearly appreciate this statute that's been on the books for since 05 and reintroduced in 08, because it has created over 5,000 jobs for the people that work behind the camera. The sweet spot competitively across the country is a 30% credit. We're happy with that. We're making money with that, and we're continuing to prosper with that. With the language in 1037, the additional 10% uplift to reach that 30% has some qualifications that may trigger some people to decide not to do business in the state. And that's their decision. It's not our union. We just hope that we don't lose jobs because of that. And we're just calling it to the committee's attention so that if, in fact, down the line we have an issue, we might decide in 5 or 6 or 10 years, if that be the case, to revisit how we've done it.
Let me do the math really fast. $600 million creating 5,000 jobs is $120,000 per job. At 6% income tax, The first $2 million each one of those 5,000 people make in Georgia, it's an even thing. So when we look at this, and great for the jobs creation, but doing that for $600 million, just so you understand, $600 million divided by 5,000 is $120,000. Divided by 6% income tax rate is $2 million. So the first $2 million each one of those 5,000 people earn, every cent of their income tax goes back just to pay the incentive to create that job. Now there's indirect benefits that go, circulate through the economy, but realize that when we're talking about these numbers, it's real money. And at some point, the race to 30, 40, whatever, you kill the golden goose. So,
Okay.
done with math today.
For a little clarification, I think he referenced the 5,000 jobs behind the camera. The overall number is closer to 30,000. You can go 2,000 plus or minus.
I'll divide that and say the first $400,000 made by anybody is tax-free.
All right. Go ahead, Terry.
Thank you. I'm intrigued because you mentioned Louisiana. I'm from New Orleans. My parents live there now, and prior to 2015, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing one of those yellow directional signs that we now see all over Metro Atlanta and throughout the state of Georgia. And I don't, Louisiana in 2015 they put a cap in. They capped their film tax credit at $180 million. In 2017 they changed that to $150 million. I don't see anybody from Georgia going to Louisiana. I mean, I think the people who were the most excited about the cap in Louisiana was Los Angeles, because they hope to bring some things back to California. We know now here in 2020 that those jobs instead came to Georgia and have been thriving in Georgia. So I'm just not clear on why Louisiana is germane, and that I don't necessarily view it as a threat, because they seem to be going retroactively.
That's just an example, not that people are going to go to Louisiana. When we got into this, Louisiana was taking all of our film business 15 plus years ago. And now the reverse is the case.
Right.
If, as we proceed and we determine that some of these smaller productions are not being shot in Georgia, and the people in 479 do not have the jobs that we currently are enjoying because they've lost production elsewhere, I'd like for us to look at that as a possible issue. That's all I'm trying to bring to this working group's attention.
Thanks for that clarification.
Okay. That is all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony, and we understand that you need to come up here and express a position. Who's next? Peter, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman.
Then Rick, and then Marshall Guest. And is anybody else here that didn't sign up? If they do, come on around and sign up.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks to the working group for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Peter Stathopoulos. I'm here representing Georgia Production Partnership, which was the original industry coalition that worked with Representative Stevens and some others in creating the current film incentive program back in 2008. And I'm also, excuse me, also my profession is auditing film tax credits here in Georgia and across the country for motion picture studios and television networks and independent film production companies. I'm here today to generally express support and thanks to the committee and express support for House Bill 1037. I think it does some very important things. I think it strikes the right balance between addressing some of the oversight concerns that were raised in the Georgia Department of Audit's study. I think it does a very good job of addressing those concerns without in any way impacting Georgia's competitiveness in attracting and growing our entertainment industry. And I think it also creates some new efficiencies and improvements to the program. For example, the new mandatory audit requirement with an outside CPA option to speed up the audits has the effect of both increasing oversight and putting local production companies and independent production companies on the same footing as major motion picture studios in terms of the value of their credits, since they're all being audited and they're all going to be worth roughly the same on the credit market. So once again, I want to thank Representative Dollar and this group for striking that balance and producing legislation which both increases oversight and improves the program and increases efficiencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And just for the committee's benefit, how long have you been working in this area and in this
Sure. So
industry?
I've been doing this roughly full time for 11 years, and my firm is one of 5 or 6 accounting firms in town that currently does this kind of work. I employ roughly 8 people. My accounting firm is large; it's several hundred people, but I have 8 people that currently work with me doing this kind of work. And I know there's 5 or 6 other accounting firms that specialize in this, and I would expect that after this bill goes into effect, there would be a significant increase in the number of accountants working here in Georgia that would be performing this kind of work.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Barr.
Thank you very much. On average, what does an audit cost maybe for a mid-sized production?
Sure, I'd say on average about $10,000.
About 10,000. And a couple of my questions do relate to this, as this is your profession. What does it take to maintain registration with the state board for that?
So the company has to register with the board. It has to meet certain professional standards of training, and it has to maintain that registration. So they have to comply with the Georgia Society of CPAs and Board of Accountancy minimum specifications.
And I believe yesterday, and I apologize for my ignorance, we stated that had to be they had to have a Georgia business license as well.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. That's all the questions that I see. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of this work group, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the few minutes that I'll have here to express my support, first and foremost, for the bill as it is currently structured. We know that there will be some tweaks probably here and there, but overall I think it is created with great intent, and I think it will plug many of the holes that we found have been problematic over the intervening years since it was instituted. My name is Rick Reitz, and I'm the former president of the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television Radio Artists, otherwise known as SAG-AFTRA, in the state of Georgia. I continue to serve on their board. I'm also a member of the Directors Guild of America, the Writers Guild of America, and more or less I'm here to represent the people that are considered above the line, not just those great people and artists and craftspeople who are below the line, but above the line. As we move forward in the generations, we've established infrastructure, and I know we're moving towards doing more homegrown content development and IP in the state of Georgia. And I can tell you, first and foremost, just from the trade union SAG-AFTRA, like IATSE 479, they had just a few hundred, now they have over 5,000. We had, relatively speaking, about 600 members back in 2008, and now we have over 2,500 members. The Directors Guild started with just 5 members 20 years ago, and there are now over 300 members of the Directors Guild living and earning a living in Georgia. And the Writers Guild, there were only a handful of us, and now there are over 176 professional writers. So this is the slow growth. This is the organic growth that we'd hope to use to help compete in the long run. We know over a period of time, and we can track it, that we may not have created much of our own in the beginning, but that is changing. I know there was a statistic that's been blown around the industry for a little bit of time that 88% of all productions that come from Georgia, or that are produced in Georgia, have come from out of state. Well, 10 years ago, it might have been 99% of all productions came from out of state. So we've begun to see progress of just that 12, 13% in this amount of time. But we always knew we couldn't build that next generation of IP until we had established the infrastructure. I think we've been very successful in doing that over the last 12 years. And so not only do we support the direction and the oversight that this creates, it will continue to establish what we want to consider to be the best, most solid, most efficient, professionally crafted incentive in the world. Right now, we are viewed in North America as the best tax incentive, period. Doesn't matter, as the chairman here mentioned, the other states are going to do 40, 50%. Competitively, at 30%, we're not asking for more. We're here to control the resources and move towards greater autonomy in the years as we move forward. And I'd also like to be helpful, because I've heard over several days of conversation within this work group and out in the streets, is I want to remind people that when the state is at risk, apparently at risk, in this one particular example of $667 million, you want to round it off, 600 million, whatever you want to do, that is the tab owed to the state. It does not consider any tax capture that has happened relative to that. So while the DOR and our good friends here that are representative of the DOR here, they say, yeah, I'm going to have to, once they've been qualified and audited, and we're going to move $600 million worth of credits. Is that the actual state exposure? I'm here to tell you it's not. Even conservatively, when we've heard other economists speak, as the recapture of income minimally in a conservative manner is somewhere between 30 and 35%. That would drop that $600 million by a third, roughly a third, and so the exposure now is $400 million, not $600 million. I'm here to argue, and other people can argue, that that amount of recapture from ancillary products, tertiary tax collection, and expansive economy, I believe, and others believe, that number doubles. And so now the exposure to the state drops down to $200 million for the same resulting direct deposit into the economy. So you'd use yesterday, Chairman Dollar, a figure of approximately 7 times greater the exposure to the state, to what the state got as direct spend, when actually that ratio is much higher. And that doesn't even take into account the promotional aspect of the things that are in consideration that heretofore no one has actually quantified. I know there was an attempt done through the Nielsen network to do it. That is not their profession. The point is you have to go to measured media companies. You don't put your name on the Mercedes Dome for the next 10 to 20 years at a cost of $10 to $20 million a year unless you know you're going to recapture from that exposure that cost in value, in kind, in some other way. We have that component already within our tax credit. That promotional aspect is wholly underrated, but it is the thing that makes us separate, and nobody has copied it. We've been in business for 12 years. We went from off the charts to probably the top 3 in the world on anybody's hit list on any given day. And we did it easily, and we did it sharply, and we were suddenly in the homes and theaters and on our cell phones everywhere in the world. Nobody gets exposure like the entertainment industry and the American entertainment industry. We have the luxury of riding on the back of an invited community that will take our message to 222 civilized countries. The only other organizations that do that, Coca-Cola. You've got the Olympics, which is once every 4 years, and the World Cup, which was in discussion yesterday and is also part of this bill. Those are the types of organizations that have that reach. That is a gigantic billboard to the world that nobody has copied. Georgia alone has that as a footprint, and suddenly the world knows about us. It didn't come out of the state budget. We wrote it on the other guys, and once again, you start to close the gap in actual recapture and value. Now you know your exposure is down to 25% of what's being projected. So keep that in mind. It's easy to throw numbers and say, hey, the state's on the hook for $600 million, $800 million, $1 billion. That is the gross exposure. It is not the net exposure. And the only way to do that is through research. And there's enough research out there to prove that. And that's my presentation. I'll accept any questions.
Thank you. Representative Belton?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So the five, you said that the Directors Guild had gone from 5 to 300. That's folks in Georgia? Is
In
that
Georgia
correct?
residents, yes, sir.
And then the Writers Guild between the handful and the 176, is that correct? In Georgia. And what was the other number you quoted?
The Screen Actors Guild.
And what was that number?
We went from roughly 600 to over 2,500.
Folks living in Georgia.
Living in Georgia, yes. They are all locally registered. And I'm a member of all those organizations. And I'm active in on either their boards or committees and active in the community.
Isn't it also true that it's not really who builds the best mousetrap, it's who advertises the best mousetrap? Isn't that correct? I'm not a businessman, but I hope that's correct.
You're absolutely right. Marketing and branding is an important component of everything we do. And you build the best mousetrap, doesn't mean anyone's going to buy it. You can build a bad mousetrap and market the heck out of it, using the chairman's language, safe language, the heck. And then all of a sudden it goes off the charts, or we wouldn't have a pet rock or anything else like that. The value of a rock, I don't know what that is, but it worked for the time being.
Just real quick, I want to say I absolutely agree, and it is a shame that we don't have the wherewithal when we're doing fiscal notes to do a dynamic scoring. We oftentimes just do the scoring, but and again, I don't tend to throw, since we're throwing around rocks, I don't tend to throw rocks at the partnership. I guess I just worry about when we say, oh, but if they do one more thing, we have to. We've got a good thing going here. We need to.
Well, I don't think we have to do anything more.
We're agreeing on that. So I agree. The indirect things, and that's what I was talking with Representative Moore about. The indirect, the churn in the economy that you look at, the trickle down that some people agree, I tend to believe in with President Reagan, is that money gets spent again and again.
Of course.
That's more so with people and things that are services that are doing than renting a car or the royalties on the music. All that said, so we do need dynamic story, but just remember the branding and things in Georgia that are good, is not quantifiable dollars out there. And so we do have to look at, we may have recouped some of this money on the road, but we do have $600 million worth of vouchers out there that come in. So I absolutely agree. We need to do more dynamic scoring, and we appreciate you. I do. You're a huge part of this thing. I don't mean to think otherwise. I just think we got to stay focused on what Chairman Dollar was. I think you're agreeing with that.
Absolutely.
And we have a ship going in the right direction. We've got to be careful about too many big turns.
Exactly right. And once again, I commend this work group and everyone associated, particularly Chairman Dollar, for leading the charge. I think this is an appropriate bill.
Thank you. And final question, Chairman Barr.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you so very much, and we've talked, and I appreciate your depth of knowledge. At risk of asking a very dumb question, but I think I do that well, so I will do that again here. We continually talk about our brand in the peach, and oftentimes I will stay late at a movie to watch through the credits to view the peach, and it is curious to me. It traditionally ends the movie, right? It's kind of toward the end. Now that my colleague has said we've opened this up, is there in the provision somewhere, and maybe this is wider for the room, is there language where our logo is located?
We began the traditional role of credits, as it were, used to be historically at the front end of the film before you watched it. Now they do what is called a cold open in many cases, and the credits now come at the end.
Right.
And then there is a historical order to how those credits go, depending on the distributor, the studio, the production company, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
We have always argued from day one for a premium placement of the Georgia State logo as close to those entities as possible. Now, you can understand the particular nature of people in California after 100 years wanting to not share that real estate, but we've made good argument for it. Most of these logos and credits are, of course, go to the very end, but we later negotiated a more premium placement after what is called above the line. So as the credits begin to roll, you see the director, the producers, the stars,
Mm-hmm.
the actors, boom, credit. Then, no disrespect to my great friends from IATSE 479, then comes below the line.
Right.
Every bit as valuable craftspeople, but that is the nature of how things have been done. And so that puts us in a more premium position. And I'd like to note, no other state, no other country has negotiated a better position.
It would be interesting for this committee to, as Chairman Martin mentioned, you know, we put a lot of skin in the game on this, to continue to negotiate that toward the end, the closer to the end. So just food for thought for our committee.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And Rick, you can probably speak to this better than me, but when you get into when you wade into those type of waters, you start, I guess, bumping into other contractual agreements and, you know, other very well staked out territories. Yeah.
And they're not given a 30% tax credit either. So
No.
I think we have a strong case to make.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add one more thing.
Sure.
To help with the thought process here from this chairman, is that we talked about 30,000, you mentioned 32,000 people who are locally registered. Keep in mind, the people that are registered to this industry are registered under the DOR NAICS code. Not everybody that participates in this industry is registered under those codes. I'll give you an example. Well, there are construction people that work down at Pinewood, for instance, at their studio. They employed on one of the movies for Marvel over 500 people in labor to do construction. Do each one of those people, when they go home, identify themselves as being part of the entertainment industry or the construction industry? And as people declare personal taxes and or corporate taxes, they do not always use that same relative guideline that the DOR uses. So it is difficult to estimate, but I'm here to say that by the nature of this business, dry cleaners don't do it. People who rent us cars are not going to identify themselves as being in the entertainment industry. We are just one more notch in the belt in a sale. But they participate. I would say those numbers easily double with the exposure to other jobs, and that's the secondary and tertiary effect that you were speaking of, is suddenly we go from a workforce of 30,000 Georgians to implying 60,000 or more. I know the MPAA is estimated as much as in the 90,000 to 96,000. And while that is inclusive of everybody that's employed, including those from out of state, we start to delineate what those numbers are. I know I've heard Mr. Akins and Dimitris Mazakouvis speak in the past about that 80 to 90% of local crews are now all Georgian. 10, 12 years ago, I would say what, Mike? 30, 40%, maybe? And there you go. And that shows you the relative growth of what's going on. We are on the move upwards. We also want to help, like the gentleman, the representative from Albany, is to help with steering more localized production and IP into rural Georgia. All those counties that have heretofore not had the business, we would like to help inaugurate some sort of movement eventually in that direction.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Marshall Guest with Metro Chamber, and I will go ahead and I don't anticipate this going over 20 minutes, but we have 20 minutes. I'm not worried about Marshall taking 20 minutes.
It's Friday afternoon. This is the way.
Very good.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify before you today. I do want to commend this working group and Chairman Dollar for being so thoughtful in his approach and hearing the concerns of many as he's incorporated this bill. I'm here today to really talk about language found on line 95, starting there, that deals with major sporting events. And the impetus for that language and what we've talked to Chairman Dollar about is to ensure that when it comes time to actively recruit the International Broadcast Center for World Cup in 2026, that this language is in place to help ensure that Atlanta is best positioned and Georgia is best positioned to land the International Broadcast Center. So I think I should probably start by saying before I get into the specifics of that, is that the Metro Atlanta Chamber is unique in that we're one of the only chambers in the country where the Atlanta Sports Council, or the Sports Council, is housed within the chamber itself. So that's why I'm here to talk about sports. At the Atlanta Sports Council and the team there, their focus is going out and recruiting these major sporting events. They went out and recruited the Super Bowl, the men's Final Four, which takes place in just a few weeks, the college football championship, and for us Georgia fans, Mr. Chairman, it didn't end the way we wanted it to down the street at Mercedes-Benz, but hopefully we can get one of those back one day. Maybe we'll get it this time. This is the way. And so as the Atlanta Sports Council recruits World Cup in 2026, the 5 or so matches that Chairman Dollar mentioned yesterday, that's an active recruitment process. Atlanta has not been awarded those games yet. We're one of 16 cities or 17 cities competing for one of 10 slots to host those matches in 2026. And then beyond that, once that decision's made, and that'll likely be made by U.S. Soccer and FIFA early next year on who is awarded the matches. And again, Atlanta could be 5 matches or so plus a semifinal game. That would be wonderful. There's a separate timeline process underway for the International Broadcast Center. And so that's what I referenced earlier. We are in a competitive process to land the International Broadcast Center. And so by including this language in the bill, it would be an incentive to help us better position Atlanta and Georgia to win that International Broadcast Center, which would give the state incredible exposure. The last time we had a Men's World Cup was in Russia in 2018. There were over 15,000 journalists who covered that event. That was over 80,000 hotel room stays, according to the numbers that we've received. So it's a significant investment or economic impact that you would realize. But beyond that, the previous speaker, Rick, did a great job of talking about the international exposure you get from hosting these types of events. And World Cup is on that magnitude, and what would make Atlanta and Georgia so much different is that the IBC, the International Broadcast Center, could be right here, housed in Atlanta at the Georgia World Congress Center. And every report that a reporter would do associated with an event they're covering here, they'd be reporting from Atlanta, Georgia. And that type of international exposure to countries all over the world is something, as we've talked about, it's tough to put a dollar figure on, but it's incredibly impactful and one that would really move Georgia forward, just like we did with the Olympics in '96. So I'll stop there and take any questions. I know that wasn't 20 minutes, Mr. Chairman.
I have one question. Can you give us some other examples of some events that would qualify? Because I think that there was some concern that this is opening the floodgates,
right,
and with no end in sight. Like what kind of events are we talking about, and what are some of the qualifications, hoops that they have to jump through
right,
to even before we even start this conversation in the bill?
No, thank you for the question. In order to qualify for this credit, you'd have to first qualify for the sales tax exemption found in 4883 paragraph 97. That means you have to have $50 million in economic impact. That means you have to be a non-recurring sporting event. So the event cannot occur more than once every 3 years. So that means these are actively recruited events that would typically go through a competitive bid process in order to land it. It's not something that would be recurring, that would be happening every single year. Examples of that, the Super Bowl. That was one that occurred a few years ago. The College Football Championship being another one. But, as far as this language being about the World Cup, it's certainly the will of the committee to clarify and tighten that language up to make it clear that that's what it's about.
Representative Dukes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm trying to get a little bit better understanding as to what it is that we're actually who and what is qualifying for this tax credit. You see, it's an International Broadcast Center. That is it something that we create here, that we leave here, that's here forever? Or is it something that follows the World Cup? I'm trying to get some understanding of what are we doing here.
That is a great question. So in the past, the way these facilities are constructed, let's talk about what would happen under this scenario. That'd probably be a better illustration. We're contemplating an entire hall being rented at the Georgia World Congress Center Authority. They would build out sets, they would build out locations, and they would report from that hall stations and media outlets from all over the globe would be housed here beginning 6 months leading up to the event itself, and then covering the event from Atlanta as these matches take place across the United States. And that's an important point. These matches will take place across the United States, Mexico, and Canada, but they would be based here. Their coverage would be based here, and they would travel out of Atlanta to cover those events.
So in other words, this center could be in Mexico, it could be in Canada, it could be any place in the United States.
It would likely be any place that is going to be hosting matches.
And
So yes, anywhere. It could be in other cities. Absolutely.
Okay,
That's
we
what
have-
makes this a competitive process.
How many matches are going to be held in Georgia?
5 or so.
How many are going to be held in, say, is there any other place in the country where these matches are going to be held?
Yes, sir. So there'll be 9 other cities in the United States that'll host.
And in those 9 cities, how many matches will be held there?
It just depends on what U.S. Soccer and FIFA determine, but it could be the nature or the neighborhood of 4 to 5. We're
Right,
speculating.
Everybody kind of got just about the same number, even.
But the unique thing about Atlanta and what we're hoping is that we do land that semifinal game, which would be a really big deal for the state.
Okay, so where you're trying to posture us into is into this position. They're going to be everywhere, but they're going to be one place where everybody's going to kind of operate from.
Yes, sir.
And you want that, and the intent of this legislation is to offer an economic incentive in the form of a tax credit for them to land and be here.
That's right. That's right. You summed it up well. And I'll bring you with me to present the bill next time.
And Marshall, what kind of a time frame are we looking at where they would be occupying an entire hall within the Congress Center?
Right. No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So leading up to the tournament, probably 6 months in advance, they would begin building this out. And then they would come in, they would cover the entire tournament from here. And they would fly out of Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport, probably on Delta Airlines.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Thank you. Is this you? All right. Representative Belton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I lived in Italy back in 1988 when they had the World Cup there, and it was not 6 months; it was a year. The whole country was crazy. That's all they talked about was the World Cup, and people say, well, you know that's not they would talk about other things in America if we had it here, but all the people in Italy are going to talk about for a year. It'd be the World Cup in Atlanta, Georgia. And all these other countries, England, France, Germany, all these other places, the whole world, the World Cup makes the Super Bowl look like a high school football game. It's that big, and I just think anything we can do. And the other thing is, just I watched the World Cup out of Russia, and there's the analysis was being done, the broadcasting was from Moscow, and back when the Women's World Cup, it was being done from Paris. Well, now we're talking about doing it from Atlanta, Georgia, as opposed to Washington, D.C. or New York City, which is it would just be a huge coup if we could get that done, and I completely support this.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Exactly who gets this credit?
Well, so it would be the outlets that produce it. So it could be FIFA Productions. It could be the other major outlets that produce. It would be the people who are investing the dollars, who are spending the money here, above the threshold, of course, that would qualify for the credit.
And would they be subject to an audit?
So when this language was submitted, hadn't seen the entirety of the bill. I can't speak to how that would work, but I would imagine so. I don't know why they wouldn't.
And so, why is it that the entire state of Georgia is being asked to give a credit for something that's going to occur in Atlanta, whereas Atlanta couldn't? I'm wondering, why does this have to be done via legislation, and why could this not be done separately as a part of an overall incentive package to land the games?
I will tell you what makes Atlanta and Georgia unique when it comes to economic development is that the state, the corporate community, and our local partners all work very effectively together to land these major sporting events. It can't be done by just one entity. In the city, They do a great deal to bring these events to Atlanta as well. But the exposure here for the International Broadcast Center would go just beyond the city of Atlanta. If you have that many journalists who are here, they're not just going to be covering what's taking place in the city of Atlanta or even the metro region. I think, you know, there could be a concerted effort to expand their view of not just Atlanta but the entire state, and that should be part of the overall process that we think about as we attempt to land the International Broadcast Center.
I appreciate that answer. I tell you, part of my concern is that in the bill as it is prior to the addition of this language, it seems to me that it's built somewhat around building infrastructure and actually growing an industry, a film industry that is Georgians, right? That is specifically focused in on Georgians investing, Georgians, folks moving to Georgia to participate in a Georgia industry. In my mind, this goes beyond that. This is kind of a one-off. Let's see if we can attract this, and it's a valid conversation. I personally don't think it belongs as a part of this legislation. I think if it's a good enough idea, it should stand on its own. But I'm just a little concerned that something like this would be shoved into a good piece of legislation.
Well, thank you for your comments. I understand this was a big one-off, and it would certainly serve to put Atlanta and the state of Georgia on the map for many years to come, and we're still talking about the Olympics to this day.
I understand, but I would also submit that, you know, we oftentimes don't give Georgia enough credit. I mean, I think not only Atlanta area, but Georgia as a whole has so much going for it that money is not always the incentive. It's a big incentive, there's no doubt about it, but I would submit that without this kind of incentive, that Atlanta and Georgia is still an incredibly attractive a place to host this event. We've got a world-class airport, we've got great weather, we've got great opportunities, great infrastructure to house lots of people and lots of production. So we have so many things going for us. It seems to me that oftentimes we actually sell ourselves a little short and think that, okay, well, if we can just simply dangle the carrot out there in forms of an incentive, that's going to be the thing about it. I would submit that we might want to do a little bit better job in selling ourselves in terms of the great things that we've got here in Georgia already.
Thank you for your comments.
All right. I know you're an excellent salesman.
Thank you, Representative Bonner.
Chairman Martin.
Yeah, just as a practical matter, when would they make these decisions?
So for matches, we expect those decisions to be final sometime about a year from now, so early 2021. The IBC timeline is a separate timeline. They've not announced that yet, but it'll be beyond the match decisions.
Well, I mean, you want the reason that I'm thinking I'm going with Dr. As a practical matter, the paragraph you referenced, 97, is repealed in its entirety in 2022.
I think the language says that, yeah, but it references as an effect on January 1, 2020.
I understand, but
right, those are two separate things.
I know, but are they not? They're not trying to make use of this credit as well.
That's a sales tax exemption for tickets, which is something entirely different.
Okay, so you'd be fine if is the World Cup going to come back and ask for that?
I'm just saying those are separate conversations.
Okay. It goes back to I agree with him. I'm not opposed. We had a long discussion yesterday of doing this. I'm not even opposed to do it in this bill in a separate section, but winding it into to this for a one-off, I fear confuses things.
If I could respond to that, Mr. Chairman, we have a very skilled legislative counsel over there. I'm confident that he could probably draft it in a way that would be satisfactory.
Well, I agree. I'd like to be like Section 6.
Yes, sir. It's the will of the committee.
Representative Newlewitz.
Yeah.
Thank you. One thing that strikes me as we're having this conversation is it seems that unlike other projects we've talked about this morning, like film, even like music, this is much less tangible. And this is not something where you're going to see a peach rolling at the end of the credits of a Marvel movie. So this is much more, this is literally behind the scenes. This is the actual production happening. Is there any way that you could, and this is not urgent, but maybe sometime next week, just present us with some information, like what scale are we exactly talking about? Because I think it's really hard to grasp the scale of what this is, and from what I understand, it's it's a pretty big deal in terms of duration and intensity. So any numbers you can have that you can share with us would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking.
Like, how many Super Bowls does this?
Right. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
An infographic.
Absolutely.
Whip one up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Representative Dukes.
You, Mr. Chairman, and Beth pretty much answered two of the questions that I had. Who makes this decision as to where they go?
FIFA and U.S. Soccer.
That they are the ones, okay, and the cost, about how much it's going to cost the state, you got any idea?
I think that's a number I need to follow up with the committee on.
Okay, and,
Yes, sir.
and Beth mentioned the peach. I was trying to figure out how we get the peach in.
I'm certainly open to having that conversation, Representative Dukes.
Oh, okay. Terry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we grow peaches there too, but you know.
Okay, that's all the questions I see. You know, again, I thought that this was a worthwhile thing to put in and start having this very conversation. So I thank you, Marshall, for coming and giving us more clarity on that. With that, is there anyone else here who would like to speak? Okay. With that, then we'll close this meeting, and for the benefit of the members and others, I plan to work on this over the weekend. If you have any changes or notice any thing that we've overlooked, please get with me, and to have a substitute ready for Monday. I believe we are on at 1:30. Yeah, 1:30 on Monday. And with that, it's Friday. Y'all go home. Thank you. Have a good weekend.